18 years. That's how long Thomas Nguyen had dedicated to TechVision. For nearly 2 decades, he had poured his expertise, his sweat, and his passion into building the company's core security infrastructure. The system he designed wasn't just a firewall or a basic encryption tool, it was the foundation of the company's success. Banks, government agencies, and multinational corporations trusted TechVision because of his work. And now, he was being told he was no longer needed. Michael Porter, the newly appointed CEO, sat across the sleek, modern conference table, fingers steepled in an attempt to appear composed. His crisp suit and carefully rehearsed expression screamed corporate efficiency, but Thomas could see right through him. "We appreciate everything you've done, Thomas," Michael said, voice smooth and insincere. "But TechVision is moving in a different direction. We need a team that's more agile, more aligned with modern trends." Thomas folded his arms, his sharp eyes never leaving the younger man's face. "Let me guess. You're replacing me with someone younger. Someone cheaper." Michael's lips curled into a tight, condescending smile. "I wouldn't phrase it like that. But we do believe that a fresh perspective is what we need." Thomas exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to laugh. A fresh perspective. The irony was almost comical. The so-called innovations that TechVision was now touting had all been ideas he had proposed years ago, ideas that were dismissed at the time because they were deemed too ambitious. Now, they wanted to push him aside and let someone else take credit. Michael continued, unfazed by Thomas's silence. "Of course, we're offering you a generous severance package. 3 months' salary, full benefits until the end of the quarter, and a glowing letter of recommendation. We're sure you'll find another opportunity, elsewhere." Thomas stared at him, unmoving. For the first time, Michael seemed slightly uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "Look, Thomas. This isn't personal. It's just business." A slow, cold smile formed on Thomas's lips. "Ah. There it is. The classic excuse of every corporate snake. Just business. Just business to discard 18 years of loyalty. Just business to push aside the man who had built the backbone of the company. Just business to rip away his livelihood while his 2 children were still in college and his mortgage still had years left to go." Thomas inhaled deeply, steadying himself. Anger wouldn't help him here. But strategy would. He reached for the envelope on the table, the severance package Michael had so generously prepared. He didn't even bother opening it. Instead, he slid it back across the table. Michael raised an eyebrow. "You're refusing the package?" Thomas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No, Michael. I'm just telling you, you'll regret this decision." Michael chuckled, a hollow sound. "Oh, I highly doubt that." Thomas stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "We'll see." He turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind 18 years of memories, 18 years of dedication. What Michael didn't know, what no one in that boardroom knew, was that TechVision had just made the biggest mistake of its existence. And Thomas was about to prove it. What do you think will happen next? Will Thomas take revenge or will he rise to success in an even better way? Comment your predictions below. Also let us know where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see our audience from around the world. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button and subscribe to EN True Tales for more incredible revenge stories every day. Don't miss part 2, it's about to get even more intense. Thomas walked out of the TechVision headquarters, his hands steady, his breath controlled, but inside, a storm was raging. He had given them 18 years, built the foundation of their success, and they had tossed him aside like an outdated piece of software. He drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. His wife, Lisa, was waiting for him at the door, concern etched into her features before he even spoke. "They let you go, didn't they?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Effective immediately. They called it restructuring." Lisa sighed, wrapping her arms around him. "They don't know what they've just lost." Thomas wanted to believe that. But right now, all he felt was the crushing weight of uncertainty. That night, after the initial shock wore off, he sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen. He could either wallow in self-pity or do something about it. He chose the latter. He began making calls. The first was to an old colleague, Jessica Zhang, now the Chief Technology Officer at Innovate Tech, TechVision's biggest competitor. They had worked together years ago, and she had always respected his expertise. "Thomas, I was just thinking about you the other day," Jessica said as soon as she answered. "Tell me, what's going on? I need to talk." "Are you free tomorrow?" "For you?" "Absolutely." That was step 1. Step 2 was looking over the files he had legally backed up before leaving TechVision. Nothing proprietary, nothing that would breach his contract, but valuable insights he had developed over the years, approaches to security that TechVision had dismissed as too costly or unnecessary. He knew better. Step 3 was making a decision. Lisa found him hours later, still at his desk. "You're not going to try to go back, are you?" she asked, concern in her voice. He shook his head. "No. But I am going to make them regret ever thinking I was replaceable." The next morning, Thomas arrived at Innovate Tech's headquarters. Unlike TechVision's sterile, corporate design, Innovate Tech had an open, collaborative atmosphere. Employees worked in teams, exchanging ideas freely, exactly the kind of environment he had always wanted. Jessica greeted him with a warm handshake. "I heard about TechVision's little stunt," she said as they walked to her office. "Unbelievable. They really think they can replace you?" "They do," Thomas said, sitting down. "But they're about to realize how wrong they are." Jessica leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me more." He laid out his vision, how TechVision had been holding back on security advancements, how they were more concerned with cost-cutting than real innovation, and how he had ideas that could take Innovate Tech to the next level. Jessica listened intently, then smiled. "You know, I've been looking for a director of security engineering. You'd have full control over the direction of our security infrastructure. No corporate politics, just results." Thomas felt something stir in his chest. Hope. Purpose. "I'm in," he said without hesitation. As he left Innovate Tech that day, he checked his phone. A message from an old colleague at TechVision flashed across the screen. "Things are falling apart here already. They have no idea what they're doing without you." Thomas smirked. It was only the beginning. Thomas settled into his new role at Innovate Tech faster than he expected. Unlike TechVision, where bureaucracy and cost-cutting had stifled real innovation, Innovate Tech encouraged forward-thinking strategies. It felt like breathing fresh air after years of suffocating under corporate nonsense. Within his first 2 weeks, he had already started restructuring the company's security infrastructure. He brought in automation tools that TechVision had refused to invest in. He reworked the company's encryption model, making it both more secure and more efficient. And most importantly, he did it with a team that respected his knowledge rather than questioned his relevance. Jessica, always one to cut through the fluff, was blunt. "We've been needing this for a long time, Thomas. TechVision's about to have a real problem keeping up." That was becoming evident faster than anyone anticipated. One afternoon, while reviewing system updates in his office, Thomas received another message from a former TechVision colleague. "You would not believe what's happening here. The security team is a disaster without you." A few minutes later, another message came in from a different source. "They're trying to fix a major system flaw, but no one understands your old architecture. Everything's breaking down." Thomas leaned back in his chair, amused but not surprised. He had spent years fine-tuning TechVision's security framework. The team they had replaced him with, young, inexperienced, and far cheaper, had no idea what they were doing. At first, he ignored the messages. TechVision's problems were no longer his. But then something caught his attention. A news alert popped up on his phone. TechVision faces potential security breach after recent internal changes. He read the article carefully. TechVision's largest client, a multinational banking corporation, had been experiencing security lapses over the past few weeks. A routine audit had revealed vulnerabilities in their encryption model, flaws that had never been an issue when Thomas was in charge. He knew exactly what had happened. The new engineers had likely tinkered with his system without fully understanding it, breaking the very foundation he had spent years perfecting. And just like that, TechVision was in trouble. Later that evening, Jessica called him into her office. She was holding her phone, shaking her head with a smirk. "Guess who just called me," she said, setting the phone down. Thomas arched an eyebrow. "TechVision?" "Not just TechVision. Their CEO. Michael Porter himself." Thomas laughed. "Let me guess. They need help?" "Oh, they're desperate," Jessica confirmed. "He didn't say it outright, but he was fishing to see if we'd consider consulting for them. Apparently, they're losing clients over these security failures." Thomas let out a slow exhale, leaning back in his chair. "They thought I was replaceable." Jessica nodded. "And now they're learning just how wrong they were." A thought crossed Thomas's mind. He had no interest in going back, but there was something very appealing about watching TechVision struggle under its own arrogance. This was only getting started. 2 weeks passed, and TechVision's situation only worsened. Thomas kept hearing whispers from his former colleagues, panic-filled emails, frantic LinkedIn messages, even a couple of late-night phone calls from engineers who were still at TechVision. The security failures were piling up. Clients were furious. Investors were getting nervous. And the new team that had replaced him? They were completely lost. But the most entertaining part? Michael Porter, the same CEO who had smugly told Thomas he was replaceable, was now in full damage control mode. Jessica strolled into Thomas's office one morning, shaking her head. "Guess what's on my calendar today?" Thomas glanced up from his monitor. "Let me guess. Another call from TechVision?" She grinned. "Close. A lunch meeting with one of their board members. Apparently, they're concerned about Porter's leadership. They're looking for insights on how we manage to strengthen our security while they're bleeding out." Thomas chuckled. "So, they've gone from ignoring me to trying to figure out how I did it?" "Looks like it," Jessica said. "And I have a feeling they're not going to like what I have to say." Meanwhile, TechVision's most lucrative client, a global banking firm, had officially terminated its contract. That was a multi-million-dollar deal gone overnight. And that was just the beginning. One evening, Thomas received an email from a familiar name, Mark Holloway, the former chief information security officer at TechVision. He had been one of the few executives who had actually respected Thomas's expertise. The subject line read, "We need to talk." Thomas opened the email. "Thomas, I know you've moved on, but I thought you'd like to know, things here are worse than you can imagine. The board is furious, investors are restless, and we're hemorrhaging clients. Porter is scrambling to fix the mess, but he has no idea what he's doing. I'll be blunt, they want you back." Thomas leaned back in his chair, reading the email twice, then a third time. They want him back. After telling him he was outdated. After replacing him with 2 engineers who couldn't handle half of what he did. After tossing him aside like he was nothing. And now, they were begging. For the first time in weeks, he actually laughed. He clicked reply and typed one sentence. "Mark, I appreciate the update, but I think you already know my answer." He hit send, feeling no regret whatsoever. They had made their choice. Now they had to live with it. Days turned into weeks, and TechVision's downfall continued to spiral out of control. The banking client they lost? Just the first domino. More followed. Insurance firms, healthcare providers, and e-commerce platforms, companies that relied on TechVision's security solutions, all started jumping ship. The reason was simple: no one trusted them anymore. Their infrastructure, once rock solid under Thomas's leadership, had become a patchwork of rushed fixes, half-baked updates, and critical vulnerabilities. And when money was on the line, no corporation was willing to gamble on a failing security system. It didn't take long before the media caught wind of it. Tech news sites started publishing headlines like, "What happened to TechVision? Security firm in freefall after executive shakeup. TechVision CEO faces backlash amid major client exodus. The stock price plummeted. The board of directors panicked. Investors started pulling out." And through it all, Thomas watched quietly, a small, satisfied smile crossing his face every time another news article confirmed what he already knew. One afternoon, while reviewing a security proposal at Innovate Tech, his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. Curious, he answered. A hesitant voice greeted him. "Thomas?" "It's Michael Porter." Thomas raised an eyebrow. The CEO of TechVision himself. Michael cleared his throat, as if forcing himself to speak. I know we didn't part on the best terms. And I know you've moved on. But I was hoping we could talk." Thomas leaned back in his chair, glancing at Jessica, who had just walked in holding a printed report. She raised a questioning eyebrow, and he simply mouthed one word, "Porter." She grinned, folded her arms, and leaned against the doorframe, fully enjoying this moment. Thomas returned to the call. "Talk? About what, Michael?" There was a long pause. Then, in a tone completely devoid of the arrogance from their last conversation, Porter spoke. "I need your help." Thomas let the words hang in the air. Michael needed him. The same man who told him he was too old, too outdated, too replaceable, was now begging for his expertise. A slow, deliberate smile crossed Thomas's face. He glanced at Jessica, who mouthed, "Make him sweat." Thomas chuckled. "Michael, I appreciate the call, but let's be honest. You didn't need me when you let me go. So why would you need me now?" Porter exhaled sharply. "I made a mistake." Thomas let the silence stretch, enjoying the rare moment of a corporate titan admitting defeat. "You're right," Thomas finally said. "You did make a mistake. But it wasn't just letting me go." Michael was silent. "It was assuming experience didn't matter," Thomas continued. "It was treating people like numbers on a spreadsheet instead of recognizing the value they bring. It was replacing expertise with inexperience and calling it progress." "I understand that now," Michael admitted. "And I'd like to fix it. I'm offering you a full return, your previous role, at double your last salary. And if you help stabilize the company, I'll throw in an executive seat at the table." Thomas tapped his fingers against his desk, pretending to think. But he already knew the answer. He smiled as he said the words. "No, Michael. I'm not coming back." Silence. Then, a quiet, defeated exhale. "I understand." Thomas could almost hear the humiliation in Michael's voice. The realization that this problem wasn't fixable without him. But it was too late. "I wish you the best of luck," Thomas said, his tone professional, even sympathetic. "You'll need it." And with that, he ended the call. Jessica laughed. "That was brutal." Thomas grinned. "That was necessary." TechVision had written him off. Now they would have to survive without him. And from the looks of it, they wouldn't. 2 months later, TechVision was a shell of its former self. The cracks that had started with the security failures became chasms. More clients cut ties, unwilling to gamble their data security on a sinking ship. Their banking partner, the one that had triggered the collapse, was just the first. A domino effect followed. Insurance firms, medical institutions, even tech startups that had once trusted TechVision's security protocols began pulling out. Revenue plummeted. Stock prices tanked. Investors panicked. And then came the final blow. One morning, Thomas was in his Innovate Tech office when Jessica walked in, holding a printed report with a smirk on her face. "You're going to love this," she said, handing him the paper. Thomas skimmed the headline. TechVision's board announces major leadership change following security crisis. He let out a small laugh. Michael Porter had been forced out. The board had finally caved to pressure from investors and removed him as CEO. After months of failed attempts to recover, after watching their competitors, especially Innovate Tech, flourish, they had no choice. They finally threw him overboard, Jessica said, crossing her arms. Took them long enough. Thomas set the report down, shaking his head. Arrogance has a cost. He learned that the hard way. Jessica leaned against his desk. And speaking of arrogance, guess who called me this morning? Thomas raised an eyebrow. She grinned. TechVision's new acting CEO. Apparently, they're open to discussions about selling off assets to keep their company afloat. And guess who they really hope will be interested? Thomas sat back in his chair, amused. They want us to buy them out, he guessed. Jessica nodded. At a very low price, mind you. They need cash, and fast. Thomas exhaled slowly. This was poetic justice. TechVision had thrown him away like he was nothing. They had underestimated him, disrespected him, replaced him. Now, they were coming to him, desperate and broken. He had already won. He didn't need to crush them further. But the opportunity was too perfect to pass up. He looked at Jessica and smiled. Let's make them an offer. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy. A month later, the deal was finalized. Innovate Tech officially acquired TechVision. Thomas didn't fire everyone. He let go of the executives who had ruined the company, but he made sure that the talented engineers, the ones who had suffered under Porter's leadership, had a chance to stay and work under a company that valued them. And as for Michael Porter? After his disgraced exit, no other tech firm wanted him. His name was synonymous with failure now. 1 year after TechVision's collapse, Thomas was standing on stage at a major industry conference, delivering a keynote speech on cybersecurity innovation. As he finished his speech, the audience erupted into applause. This was his moment. Not just to prove TechVision wrong, but to prove himself right. That experience mattered. That loyalty and respect mattered. That people weren't just replaceable. As he stepped down from the stage, a young engineer approached him nervously. Mr. Nguyen, I just wanted to say, your story really inspired me. I was thinking of leaving tech because I felt like the industry didn't value people like me. But now, I think I'll stick around. Thomas smiled, clapping a hand on the young man's shoulder. Good, he said. Because people like you are the future. Just don't let them tell you that experience doesn't matter. And with that, he walked away. The industry had changed. And this time, he was the one shaping it. This story is a lesson in respect, experience, and corporate arrogance. Thomas dedicated his life to his company, only to be cast aside like he was nothing. But instead of letting that define him, he proved his worth in the best way possible. What do you think about Thomas's decision? Would you have done the same? Comment 2 if you love this story. Comment 7 if you think Thomas should have handled things differently. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe to EN True Tales so you never miss an incredible story like this. A new story is coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss it.